I'm sorry, this man is villainously incompetent. Villainously incompetent. He's like kind of cute, but like he's strangely wearing a mask. She's like, what a strange fashion choice to be actively wearing a masquerade mask right now. But all right. Sarah J. Maas is really putting way too much pressure on 8-year-olds. We are starting our ACOTAR recap today. I'm so excited to talk about A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas with you. We are going to be going through every single chapter in probably too much detail, but I want to talk about like everything. And I'm going to share my thoughts as we go. This will be spoiler free, as hard as that is for me, especially in this book series. I feel like in Throne of Glass, it felt less weird for me to be going through it spoiler free. But as I was making the notes for this book, I'm like, I want to talk about things that happen later. Anyway, but we will be doing spoiler free. So like, I won't spoil anything within the sections. ACOTAR was my first Sarah J. Maas read. I started with this series in 2020 and it like really opened up the world of fantasy for me. I was not someone who really before that had read a lot of like second world fantasy, and this book was like the origins for me. Let's jump into things. So we're going to start out with like a map of Prythian and just kind of like talk about what's happening. So Prythian is this island where our pretty much entire story is going to take place. Feyre, our heroine, lives in the Mortallands. She lives in the very bottom of this island, and above the Mortallands, there's this big wall that separates the small sliver of land where humans live from where the Fae live. And the Fae have like the majority of this island. There's also stuff happening on the continent, which we will get to when we get to. But there's like a main continent. There's also an island over to the side called Hybern. Anyway, we open our story with Miss Feyre Archeron. She is in the woods doing some hunting. It's winter. She's hungry. Her family's hungry. She knows if she does not catch anything tonight, like it is going to put her and her family in a like very risky situation as far as like starvation, because obviously in the winter it is much harder to find things to hunt for. There's like less stuff out and about, but her family can't afford like buying food in the market, and so she's like, I gotta get something. But it's also getting dark out, and there have been a lot of rumors that there have been a lot of wolves in the woods lately, and she obviously doesn't want to get eaten by a wolf. That would not be a helpful thing to have happen to her. So she is like trying to get something soonish because she knows she's going to need to leave the forest soon. She doesn't catch anything because she can't be out here after dark. And she's thinking as she's like strolling through the woods hunting, she's thinking about how much she like her like true wish, her desire for her life is that her sisters, she has 2 sisters, we'll meet them in a minute, will go get married so she can just like chill at home with her dad and maybe have some time for a hobby. She like likes painting, she likes artistry, and she would like love to just have a little bit of time to do that. And also to not have 4 mouths to feed. I guess she has to feed her own mouth as well. 4 mouths to feed, but just like her and her father to take care of. Like that's her dream in life. Luckily, well, not luckily, and this does not point her to the direction of her dream, but it does point her in the direction of dinner. She spots a doe and she's like, thank goodness I am gonna not come home empty handed. Unfortunately, almost immediately there is a wolf that also spots this doe. He is like giant. He's like a giant wolf, and she's like like really the best case scenario would be to like let the wolf eat the deer and to like, you know, leave so the wolf doesn't eat her. But she's like, I need this deer so badly, but I also can't like bring attention to myself by like shooting the deer and then, you know, hoping to fight a wolf off who's going to try to carry the deer off. So like if she wants this deer, she's going to have to kill this wolf. And as she's looking at this wolf, she's like, he's actually like so giant, he doesn't totally look like a normal wolf. You know, like I haven't spent a lot of time with wolves, but she is like, I think this wolf might be Fae. There's like rumors that the Fae can like shapeshift. And she knows that like killing a Fae would be much harder than killing a wolf, because Fae can only be killed by ash, this like the wood from an ash tree. And so she knows she's gonna have to use her one like magic special ash arrow to kill him if he's a Fae. And so she's like, okay, do I risk my one special ash arrow, which I spent like all of my money on this wolf? Also, like, just risk not getting the wolf exactly right. If I don't kill this wolf, he's gonna then come after me. Or do I like go hungry? And she's like, okay, I think I'm gonna risk it. Hits, and then she like pulls it back. She like, I don't know. She hits him with the arrow. She hits him with the arrow, and it goes through his eyeball. Gross. Or like pretty quickly collapses. She's like, phew. And then she then takes a second, shoots the deer as well. So she has this wolf and this deer in front of her. She obviously can't carry them home. She's like several miles into the woods, and she's just a girl. And she's like a fairly malnourished girl. Like She can't carry a massive wolf and also a deer. And so she's like, okay, here's what's going to happen. Unfortunately, despite the fact that it would be incredibly helpful to have all of this meat, it's more important to her that like she gets home safely. So she like skins the wolf and like does what she needs to do with the deer. And she carries the deer and the hide of the wolf back to her cottage. By the time she gets home, it's dark out. And this is where we will meet the Archerons. So, of course, we already have Feyre Archeron, our heroine. Then we have Elaine. Elaine is the middle daughter. So Feyre is the baby of the family. Then we have Elaine, who's the middle daughter. And she's just like constantly described as like lovely and sweet. And like both Feyre and Nesta baby her a bit because she's just like so sweet and soft. Feyre kind of laments the fact that neither of her sisters really help her like at all. And she talks about how it just like truly would never have even like occurred to Elaine. She says of Elaine sometimes just didn't grasp things. And we'll like obviously get to spend more time with Elaine as we move through the series. Her sisters are like a pretty prominent part of the series. But like in this, it does a little bit sound like Feyre is just calling Elaine stupid. She's like, Elaine is a little slow, a little dumb. I don't actually think that's what she's getting at. Elaine is just like kind of like drifting in her own world. She's giving kindergarten teacher. That's like the energy she's giving off, you know? That's the vibe of Elaine. And we're told this story of Elaine growing a flower garden as they starve to death, okay? And that Feyre, like, because again, they're so poor, but Feyre would sometimes take the little money she would earn selling meat in the market and buy flower seeds for Elaine's flower garden. And then when Elaine gets money, there have been many times in which she has bought like little things for Feyre. She's bought in Feyre like paints. And we'll come to find, this will come up like multiple times, that Feyre does love painting. She has this like real passion for like art and just like doesn't really have the time or energy or money to explore that in any real capacity. Elaine just like loves and appreciates beauty, and you like have to be like, okay, I get it. But also like Carrot's gorgeous. I like really think that Elaine growing a flower garden as they're starving to death is a little embarrassing. I understand that like beauty is important, okay? Like we should pursue beauty, I think, as a rule. Even in situations of survival, like I think it is important to still pursue beauty. But like a flower garden, like go look at the flowers in the woods, girly. Like go look at some flowers at someone else's house. You don't need to grow them at our house. You could grow cabbage at our house. You could grow potatoes at our house. You know, I do think Elaine maybe could have picked a different route, but Feyre doesn't seem to think so. And then we get to Nesta. Okay, let's chat about Nesta. Okay, Nesta is my gal. Nesta is my gal. She's the eldest of the Archeron sisters. And according to Feyre, Nesta was born with a sneer on her face. She is like really characterized as someone like cruel and mean, and she's taken the loss of their fortune the hardest. So the Archeron family was very well off. Papa Archeron was a very successful merchant up until Feyre was, I believe, like 11. So for the first 10 or so years of her life, they were like a very well-to-do family. When they lost their fortune, Nesta like really took it the hardest. And Nesta also blames their current situation on their father. Like she hates their dad in a very like visceral way. She is just like not a fan of Papa Archeron at all. Okay, let's talk about her. So like I said, Nesta's my gal. Okay. I'm a Nesta apologist, like a book one Nesta apologist. I know, that's a crazy thing to say. I'm not like a chapter one Nesta apologist, okay? Nesta, I will tell you when Nesta became my gal, and it is not in chapter, well, I guess she's not even in chapter 1. It's not in chapter 2 either. A Court of Silver Flames, the like 5th book in the series, I think if I'm doing the math right, is about Nesta. And we like learn more about her there. And I think a lot of people became Team Nesta then. And I just want to say that I've been Team Nesta since book 1. Mm-hmm. If you watched my Throne of Glass series, you knew I worked for Chaol. I was on Chaol's PR team. I was on his payroll. He paid me to talk about him. Not in a real way, obviously. But I did feel like some loyalty to Chaol because I feel like Chaol gets unfairly crapped on the internet. So like I worked for Chaol, but like I am Nesta. Nesta is me. We are one. I like fear the worst of me is the worst of Nesta. Like I read Nesta book 1 and I said, oh, I know that girl because I am that girl and I've been that girl, you know? And so I just have like a very different relationship with Nesta as I do Chaol. In this house, in these videos, we are going to treat Nesta with gentleness. We're going to treat Nesta with gentleness even when she doesn't deserve it, because she often does it, because I think Nesta needs gentleness, even if she doesn't deserve it. I think she is truly, like Chaol, doing the best she can with what she has been given, and her best is like really bad. Her best is terrible. Her best is often harmful, and we'll talk about that. And I'm like, I don't want to say like we're not going to criticize Nesta, because I think there are ways in which her actions should and can and should be critiqued, but we are also going to treat her with like compassion and gentleness. I think one of the best things about reading, and one of the most important reasons why reading fiction is so inherently valuable and something that is incredibly important to me, not only as like a hobby, but something that I choose to carve out, is because fiction allows us to empathize with people that we don't have the opportunity to empathize with in real life. It is an exercise in empathy. It's an exercise in seeing mistakes and understanding where people come from. And I think we are going to be approaching ACOTAR in these video series, and particularly approaching Nesta with empathy and compassion, because I think she doesn't always deserve it, but I do think she needs it. With all that being said, I think Chaol was really easy to defend, because for Chaol, almost everything went back to Dorian. Like every action he made, every mistake Chaol made was really him trying his hardest to like keep his best friend safe. Where I think Nesta is a lot harder to defend, because I think Nesta's actions are cruelty often just for the sake of cruelty. I think Nesta is like an open wound, and she's just like lashing out in like pain. Like I think Nesta is in deep pain for much of the series, and that's a lot harder to justify behaviors, and like a lot of her behavior should not be justified. But I invite you, if you are not already a Nesta fan, to approach Nesta in these video recaps with kindness and compassion, because again, I think empathy is something we need to practice, and I think fiction is a really low stakes way to do that, because like Nesta is at the end of the day fictional. Like Nesta is not actively causing harm to anyone. Like we are safe. The people in the book are not safe, but they're not real. And so I think practicing empathy in this space that is like super safe is a good thing for all of us to be doing. Anyway, there's Miss Nesta. And then we have Papa Archeron. Papa Archeron has a leg that is like described as like ruined. He has like a ruined leg. He was hobbled. We like come to find out that a few years after their mother died, Papa Archeron's had some of his merchant boats go missing, and he wound up like owing a lot of money. And then like the people who he'd taken out the loan with broke his legs. We kind of like hear the story of what happened to him. Happened when Feyre was 11. So their mother died. The Archeron mother died when Feyre was 8. So 3 years later, we have this incident with the creditors coming and like literally like beating him black and blue. And Feyre had stayed and watched this happen. Her sisters went to like hid in the back room, but Feyre stayed out and watched and pleaded for them not to kill their father. And we are told that like it took him a year before he was able to walk a mile, and they spent like all of the rest of their money that they had. Remember, that was like he got beaten up because he couldn't pay back his loans. It was not like they were rolling in it, but they spent a lot of money on healers trying to get him well. And now he still really can't do a lot. Like he's pretty severely disabled in terms of his ability to like physically move through the world. He uses a cane. It doesn't seem like he can walk very far without being in pain. And so now what he does for like to contribute to the family. Remember, he was like the sole provider of his 3 daughters, who at the time were 11, I don't know how old Elaine was, like 12 or 13, and 14. And now he makes wood carvings. He just like sits and carves wood. He has like a little Etsy shop. And like TBH, I would be mad if I was Nesta too. If my dad, who again was the sole provider for our family of 3 children, decided that now what I'm going to do to provide for our family is open an Etsy shop. Like I understand things will be difficult, but like I need you to try a little harder, buddy. Bestie, you got 3 kids you gotta take care of. Like, you're gonna have to do something better than that. Like, he was a merchant. That wasn't like a very physically demanding job. Like, could we find something else in that vein? Could we figure something out? I don't know. Papa Archeron is really my nemesis in this book. I know I just talked about how we should treat Nesta with empathy. Papa Archeron, I have a hard time treating with a lot of empathy in this book. Okay. Anyway, Feyre has arrived back at the cottage. She has the deer. Elaine is so excited because she's starving. And Feyre is like, no one even asked about the blood that's all over me. And like, Feyre, babe. Feyre, bestie girl. Your sisters are the worst. Like, no one is going to disagree with you that your sisters are being the worst in this chapter. But you do have a dead deer slung on your back. Like, I also would assume the blood was from the animal that you clearly killed and carried home. I don't think I'd be like, oh my gosh, are you bleeding? Like, you have a dead body on your back. I'm gonna assume, like, A points to B. And then Feyre makes mention of this, like, deathbed promise she made her mother. We will, like, talk about this ad nauseum later, but, like, she made some deathbed promise to her mother about, like, taking care of her family. And, like, that is why this is, like, her central pillar. Kale's central pillar back in the day was Dorian. Feyre's is this, like, promise, this deathbed promise she made to her mother to, like, keep her family together. Feyre kind of explains the plan. She's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to eat this meat, and then I'm going to sell these hides. And Elaine's like, hey, when we have money, I need a new coat, which, like, apparently she does. And then Nesta's like, I need new boots. And Feyre is like, your boots are, like, literally perfectly fine, bestie. Like, they're fine. She's like, I'm not, Nesta, we have bigger fish to fry than your boots that are totally fine. And Papa Archeron is like, oh my gosh, where did you even get this deer? Like, it's really risky business being in the woods right now. Like, what are you doing so near to the wall? Like, this is so dangerous. Okay, Papa Archeron, what is she supposed to do? Just let everyone starve to death? Like, it's not like you're contributing to the family. Like, if you don't want your daughter to go in the woods because it's dangerous, like, maybe figure out an alternate option. Because right now, the options are starve to death, which Feyre has decided she doesn't want to do, or go into the woods. And then Nesta says to Feyre, you stink like a pig covered in its own filth. Can't you at least try to pretend you aren't an ignorant peasant? And this really hurts Feyre's feelings because it's mean. Also, she's like, I never learned manners. Like, I am an ignorant peasant. Like, she never learned reading and writing because they became, like, impoverished when she was, like, too young. We will, again, talk about this later. But she does feel like Nesta really looks down on her because Nesta, like, was, like, much older when their mother died and when they became poor. And so Nesta, like, has a lot of manners, a lot of etiquette. She, like, knows how to hold herself like a proper lady. And she really looks down on Feyre for not having those same set of skills. And then Feyre's like, hey, Nesta, did you chop the wood I asked you to chop? And Nesta's like, you're not the boss of me. And Feyre's like, okay, well, your dinner's going to be cold then if you don't chop the wood. And they, like, argue about that. And then Feyre heads to the back bedroom. And then we get a little bit about the dresser. And the dresser is, like, a very important ACOTAR set piece. Here's the quote about the dresser. I slung off my outer clothes onto the sagging dresser, frowning at the violets and roses I'd painted around the knobs of Elaine's drawer, the crackling flames I'd painted around Nesta's, and the night sky, whirls of yellow stars standing in for the white around mine. I'd done it to brighten the otherwise dark room. They'd never commented on it. I don't know why I'd ever expected them to. So they have this dresser, each one, like, painted with the, like, symbols of each sister. So Feyre is, like, the night sky, Elaine is this beautiful flower garden, and Nesta is flames. Then they have the deer for dinner, and we get a little bit more about Mama Archeron. We learn that she was imperious and cold with her children, joyous and dazzling among the peerage who frequented our former estate, doting on my father, the one whom she truly loved and respected. But she had also truly loved parties, so much so that she didn't have time to do anything with me at all, save contemplate how my budding abilities to sketch and paint might secure me a future husband. And then we get the full deathbed promise, and we learn that Mama Archeron, on her deathbed, asked Feyre to stay together, stay with the family, and look after them. I need to figure out my timelines of events. I will clarify. Again, we shouldn't be asking this of 11-year-olds. Editing Michelle here. I do get very confused throughout this book on the timeline of events. I believe, according to my internet research, the timeline is a little foggy for everyone. But I believe Feyre's mother dies when she's 8. And Nesta is 11, and then they lose their fortune when Feyre is 11 and Nesta is 14. I mean, that doesn't change much. 8-year-olds and 11-year-olds, both still babies. And then at the table, Nesta is telling the story about Tomas, the woodcutter's son, and Elaine is, like, giddy because she's explaining that Tomas wants to marry Nesta. And Feyre is like, you can't even chop wood for us, but you're going to go marry a woodcutter's son? Which, like, honestly, that does make sense. If Nesta doesn't want to chop wood, maybe she should marry a woodcutter's son. Because it seems like he would then be the woodcutter. I actually think that's smart. Smart thinking, Feyre. And Nesta was like, I thought your whole big plan was for me and Elaine to get married off so you could have enough time to paint your masterpieces. And Feyre's like, believe me, the day you want to marry someone worthy, I'll march up to his house and hand you over, but you are not going to marry Tomas. And then Nesta's like, there's nothing you can do. Claire Better told me this afternoon that Tomas is going to propose to me any day now, and then I'll never have to eat these scraps again. And at least I don't have to resort to rutting in the hay like an animal, like you do with Isaac Hale. This is a situation in which I am going to defend Nesta a little bit, because who gave Feyre the rights? If my baby sister tried to boss me around like this, I understand Feyre is like really keeping this family afloat, but like she's still the youngest of the family, you know? Like she can't be like, you're not allowed to marry this boy. Who are you to tell me that? It's like, I think she's overstepping. I think Feyre is like overstepping a little bit. Feyre is so fixated on like making sure her family is safe and good that sometimes she does overstep and like really boss them around in a way that just like doesn't totally feel appropriate to her role within the family. And to like, she's got to let her sisters kind of like live their own lives and make their own choices. So they fight back and forth, and Nesta's like, well, we're in love, so it doesn't even matter that I don't have a dowry. And she's like, and Isaac is engaged to someone else, so like, what are you even doing? Nesta storms off shouting about how Feyre just like is ordering them all around, and Elaine follows to comfort them, leaving Feyre and Papa Archeron at the table. And Feyre's like, to her dad, you need to talk to some sense into her. And Papa Archeron says, if it's love, what are we to do? I'm sorry, this man is villainously incompetent. Villainously incompetent. Feyre has like a real soft spot for her dad. Not me. Feyre's like, Tomas is a creep. He is a creeper. And Papa is like, we need hope as much as we need meat and bread. We need hope, else we cannot endure. So let her keep this hope, Feyre. Let her imagine a better life, a better world. And Feyre is like, there's no such thing. This is stupid and a waste of everyone's time and dangerous for Nesta. I'm gonna need you to turn your brain on. The next day, the Archeron girlies are headed to the village. It's smelling delicious as they get closer. It's market day. Things are smelling good. I imagine it smells like the kettle corn that I feel like is always at farmers markets. Like, I don't even really like kettle corn, but like the smell of like the kettle corn at the farmers market, it'll get you being like, I think I need some kettle corn. I think that's the vibe. They encounter the children of the blessed, who are these like religious cult vibes people who are obsessed with the Fae. And there's a whole gaggle of them. And Nesta is immediately like, go away. You'll find no converts over here. And Nesta is wearing like an iron bracelet, which supposedly wards off the Fae. We've had like a couple little mentions of one, they have these like symbols carved into the doors to like ward off the Fae. And then like Nesta and Elaine both have these like iron bracelets that are supposed to ward off the Fae. There's like a lot of different kind of superstitions about like what keeps the Fae at bay. And this is what Nesta is good at, because Nesta is mean and has no shame about being mean, so she will be mean to these children of the blessed. And the children of the blessed girlie says, I thought the same thing about the Fae, but recently I had a friend go to the border with an offering and she wasn't sent back, and now I think she's the bride of a high Fae lord. So that's so exciting, and now I'm a fan. And Nesta is like, how do you know that's what happened? They like probably just ate her. And the girlie was like, no, Fae would literally never harm us. They're so nice, actually. And Feyre is like, okay, we're leaving. And Feyre pulls them away and sends them off with instructions to meet back there in an hour. And Feyre's like looking at the options of places to like sell this wolf hide to, and she eventually ends up talking with a mercenary. And the mercenary is like, I only take coin. And Feyre's like, okay, well, I don't have any money. So then the mercenary sees this wolf pelt, and she asks Feyre how she found this like wolf. And Feyre kind of like tells the story, and she offers to buy the wolf pelt. And Feyre knows she's like overpaying by like a lot. And the mercenary says, I see your sisters lurking and they look hungry. And Feyre's like, I don't need your like money for pity. Okay, like we're not beggars. And the mercenary says, no, but you do need my money. It's up to you. And Feyre says, why? The mercenary says, someone once did the same for me at a time when I needed it most. I figure it's time to repay what is due. And Feyre says, okay, I could give you some wood carvings from my dad's Etsy shop. And the mercenary is like, no, thank you. I'm good, actually. Thank you so much. But like, those are kind of ugly. She doesn't say the last part, but I assume they are. Before the mercenary leaves, she gives Feyre a warning not to stray too far into the woods because spooky ooky things are slipping through the cracks and they will gobble her up. Feyre thinks to herself, kind of explaining a little bit more about the history of the Fae and the humans in this world. Once long ago, and for millennia before that, we had been slaves to high Fae overlords. Once we had built them glorious, sprawling civilizations from our blood and sweat, built them temples to their feral gods. Once we had rebelled across every land and territory. The war had been so bloody, so destructive, that it took 6 mortal queens crafting the treaty for the slaughter to cease on both sides and for the wall to be constructed. The north of our world conceded to the high Fae and fairies who took their magic with them. The south to we cowering mortals, forever forced to scratch out a living from the earth. And Feyre's like, hey, just wondering if the Fae are coming, like, let me know because I will take my family further south. And the mercenary is like, well, no one really knows what the Fae are planning right now, but a friend told me recently that a group of martaks, which are like these big boar lion things, were found in the forest, and then the mercenary goes on to tell her about like personally encountering a Fey beast that like bit her and like took her out for like 2 months. So like things are definitely like creeping over the wall. And then Nesta comes over and is like, hey, get away from her. The mercenaries are dangerous. Don't go near them again. And Feyre is like, what the heck are you talking about? And Elaine is like, they robbed us a few weeks ago, like just a few coins. And it like wasn't her specifically. It was just like a mercenary. Feyre is like, why didn't you tell me? And Nesta says, what could you have done? Challenged him to a fight with your bow and arrows? Who would even care if you reported him? And Feyre's like, why didn't you tell your boyfriend? Unfortunately, before Nesta can like, come together with some spitting insult to respond to that, Feyre spots Isaac on the other side of the square. Feyre's like friends with benefit situation. They mostly just like sleep together, and they have been for the past few years, but now he's engaged to someone else, and Feyre knows that their relationship is coming to an end. She like refuses to get in the middle of like a family like that. And so Feyre decides to go talk to Isaac, and she gives Elaine and Nesta like 20 coins to go spend and sends them off. Back home at dinner, Elaine and Nesta have spent every single dollar Feyre gave them, and Elaine bought a new chisel for their dad, and Nesta even chopped the wood without being asked, so like slay, Nesta, good job. And Feyre is about to bring up the Thomas Mandray situation again when a huge roar rips through the cottage. Feyre grabs her knife, and she is like, okay, like I can't let myself get frozen with fear because like I need to protect my family. Like I know that like if I don't, like they're toast. And immediately she knows that this like beast in their cottage is a fairy. And Papa Archeron is like, please, whatever we have done, we did so unknowingly. And Nesta's like, we didn't kill anyone. And Feyre's like, get out. And the beast is like growling and howling. And Feyre chucks a hunting knife at the beast's head, but it just like swats it away. And the beast goes, you killed him. Feyre's like, hey, like, what are you talking about? And the beast is like, the wolf, you killed the wolf. Elaine goes, a wolf? And Feyre's like, it was an accident. What can we offer as payment? Like, sorry, I'll give you anything you want from the house. I mean, it's not that nice, but like, my dad makes sick wood carvings. Do you want one? And the beast just like laughs because he does not want a sick wood carving. And Feyre says, it was me. And the beast is like, why should I believe you? Clearly you would lie to keep them safe. And Elaine is like, no, we like literally didn't kill anything, and like it wasn't about us. And then Papa Archeron is like, it was me, but we literally wouldn't have known. We wouldn't have killed it if we knew it was Faye. Like, accident, sorry. And Tamlin is like, liar, you would have killed it extra if you knew it was Faye. And Feyre thinks to herself like, okay, well, like that's probably true. I probably would have been like, get out of my woods, fairy. And then Tamlin's like, did it attack you? Were you provoked? And Feyre is like, no, but given everything that has been done to us, it deserved it. And Feyre is like, okay, I know with certainty this beast is going to kill me now, like for sure. But she also like feels pretty confident that Nesta will find a way to get Elaine out of there. Like Nesta's priority has always been like keeping Elaine safe. And so she knows like Nesta will take care of that. Papa Archeron, rest in peace. He's probably not going to make it through the situation either. The firelight shone upon his exposed fangs, and I wondered how they'd feel on my throat, and how loudly my sisters would scream before they too died. But I knew with a sudden, unquailing clarity that Nesta would buy Elaine time to run. Not my father, whom she resented with her entire steely heart, not me, because Nesta had always known and hated that she and I were the two sides of the same coin, and that I could fight my own battles. But Elaine, the flower grower, the gentle heart, Nesta would go down swinging for her. I like feel like there's so much in this little statement. One, the like two sides of the same coin. This is a metaphor that Sarah J. Maas loves, and she uses it always with like people who like really play very important roles in the other one's life. Like she used it in Throne of Glass with Aedion and Aelin, and also with Selena and Irene. She likes to talk about it as these like two very different but like necessary forces in the world. And I think Feyre has like a pretty interesting relationship to Nesta, I think, in this first book, in which she like really, even though her sister is so mean and cruel to her, like I feel like she still like looks up to Nesta in a lot of ways, and she respects Nesta and like sees Nesta in a way that I don't think really anyone else does. Like even Nesta, I don't think Nesta even sees herself as clearly as Feyre sees her. And I like love this idea that like she recognizes and like sees the same tenacity in Nesta that Feyre sees in herself. It's just like Nesta has pointed it like spikes out to the outer world, where Feyre has turned it into like a spear pulling her forward and pulling her family through to survival. Feyre asks what payment for the treaty would demand, and Tamlin explains that it's a life for a life. And Feyre was like, okay, well, I've never heard of this, but like fairies can't lie, so I guess it must be true. And she's like, okay, that's fine, like kill me outside then. Like I don't want my family to have to watch me be murdered. And Tamlin's like, actually, I'm just gonna like take you back to Prithian instead. Like, you can come live on my lands instead of me killing you. And Feyre's like, that doesn't really make a ton of sense. Like, why would you invite me to your house? Tamlin's like, stop asking questions. Either like come with me or I will have to kill you. And Papa Archeron is like, hi, I could get gold. And Nesta's in the corner just seething. Like, oh, you could go get gold? Where? Why haven't you done it this whole time? I just know Nesta's seething about that in the corner. But Feyre is like ignoring her father because like obviously 1, they can't get gold. Like where? 2, he doesn't want gold. And so he's like, okay, when do we leave? And Tamlin's like, right now. And Feyre turns to her family and she gives instructions on what to do. She's like, okay, turn any venison that's left over after tomorrow into jerky, then use the like money that I left on the dresser like really wisely. Like, it's all you will have for a while, so be careful with it. You guys need to learn how to hunt. Isaac will help you if you ask him. And then she turns to Nesta and she says, do not marry to Maas. His father beats his wife, and now their sons do nothing to stop him. Bruises are harder to conceal than poverty. My theory on this is I do think Nesta knows. I think Nesta knows, or at least suspects this. Like, Nesta's not stupid, and Nesta is like pretty observant, but I do think Nesta would marry a beast and would marry like a brutal man if she needed to keep herself and her sister safe. Like, she very much is like focused on money. She like understands how much wealth changes things, as someone who like lived the first half of their life as a wealthy girl and then became impoverished. I think her goal has been to get them back into a place where they have like money and the security that money offers. And I think she would be willing to do a lot to do that. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my theory. Then she turns to her father, and her father says to her, Feyre. His fingers trembled as he grasped my gloved hands, but his eyes became clearer and bolder than I'd seen them in years. You are always too good for here, Feyre. Too good for us. Too good for everyone. He squeezed my hands. If you ever escape, ever convince them that you've paid the debt, don't return. I hadn't expected a heart-wrenching goodbye, but I hadn't imagined this either. Feyre, he stumbled over my name, his throat bobbing. You go somewhere new and you make a name for yourself. I think this is kind of rude. Like, what? What do you mean? Like, this would be a nice thing to say, I guess, like, on a normal Tuesday, if you were like, hey, Feyre, I, like, really think your responsibility to us is, like, I think it's a burden on you. Like, go find somewhere, like, new where we're not going to be a burden on you. I think that could be different. But as she's, like, being carried off by this beast, like, now's not the moment to be like, hey, if you ever get free, don't come back here. Like, I think he means it nicely, but it's kind of rude. Anyway, they head out. Feyre jumps in the back of the horse. Tamlin is waiting for her. This is Tamlin. We don't know his name yet, but spoiler, it's Tamlin. And Feyre's like, what the heck am I walking into? Because, like, they aren't supposed to take human slaves. That is, like, a part of the human-fae treaty. But she did just murder a fae, so, like, all bets are off. And Tamlin goes on to explain, like, the situation. And we get, like, a little bit more about, like, Prithian and how it's set up. So we know that the fae part of Prithian is divided into 7 courts. There's also fae on the mainland. But, again, we only really care about the ones on the island. And she, like, wonders how far they're going to be traveling. And Feyre's just, like, watching as the Tamlin, still in beast form, travels through the snow. And she's thinking about how her father is going to have to resort to begging to make the money. And she also knows that Nesta will do unspeakable things to keep her and Elaine alive, that she knows without Feyre there to, like, provide them food, that Nesta will probably have to turn to some terrible things. And she knows Nesta will do it for Elaine. And Feyre turns to the beast and says, do you have a name? Feyre's about to, like, ask him more questions after Tamlin refuses to give Feyre his name, but she blacks out. When she wakes up, it's morning. And she realizes that, like, Tamlin knocked her out with magic, which is, like, low-key a little rude, especially when she realizes they are, like, at the gates of an estate in Prithian. And it, like, takes 2 days to get from the wall, like, from her cottage to the wall. So it's been at least 2 days that she's been unconscious. She walks through and they are in a gorgeous manor garden. It's, like, so pretty. She's never seen anything this beautiful. And it's also spring there, even though it's, like, deep winter back at the cottage. And the seasons seem controlled by magic. And Feyre looks back over her shoulder and realizes that the gates to the estate are still open. And she's thinking about running for, like, a moment, but she's, like, far too weak. She hasn't eaten anything in the 2 days that she's been blacked out. And she knows she wouldn't make it, like, the half mile back to the gates. And so she follows Tamlin inside. It is, like, absolutely stunning. The Tamlin leads her into a dining room where there's, like, an absolute feast on the table. Just, it's, like, overloaded with food. And Feyre is like, oh no, what am I supposed to do? Like, she's always been warned that if she were taken by a fae and taken back to their home, you're not supposed to, like, eat fae food. But, like, if she lives here, like, eventually she's gonna have to eat or she will die. And then the beast turns into a man, and he's a high fae man. He's like kind of cute, but like he's strangely wearing a mask. She's like, what a strange fashion choice to be actively wearing a masquerade mask right now, but all right. And Tamlin's like, hey, you should have a snack. And Feyre's like, and she's like slowly inching out of the room. And Feyre's like, hey, oh, by the way, who the heck are you? Again, I asked the same question because he's like, especially because he's like dressed like a warrior. Like they're in this like gorgeous manner, but like he's dressed like a warrior. And Tamlin's like, you need to sit down and eat unless you would rather faint. And Feyre's like, I can't. Fae food is not safe for humans. And Tamlin is like, it's literally fine. Also, feel free to leave whenever you want. Like, I'm not your jailer. You're not trapped here. You just have to stay in like the Fae part of Prythian. I guess Prythian is like the Fae lands. The Mortal lands have a separate name. I don't know. And then a redhead Fae man strolled into the room, and he's also in a little mask. And Feyre is like, again, what is with the mask fashion here? And Lucien is like, is Andres dead? And Tamlin says, yeah, a mortal girl killed him, and I brought her back here. Here she is. This is like the first time Lucien like actually looks over and like sees Feyre. And this is also the first time that Feyre sees that Lucien has like a big scar on his face, and one of his eyes is like gold. Like he has like a eyeball prosthetic. He's an eyeball prosthetic. That's gold. And Lucien is like, seriously, that little thing brought down Andres with an ash arrow? Ugh. Now we're stuck with her. This one? Ugh. Tamlin sends her off with Alice, who's wearing a bird mask and is one of the servants in the house, clearly. And Feyre, bless her heart, is like, everyone here must really love fashion. I'm gonna have to get myself a cute little mask so I can blend in. Actually, she doesn't think this. This is what I would think if I arrived here and I said, oh, everyone's wearing a mask. They love fashion, even on just like a regular day. Anyway, she's thinking a lot about their mask. But before she gets too far, she overhears Lucien. That's the hand the cauldron thought to deal us. Maybe we should just dump the girl or kill her. She's nothing but a burden here. She clearly wants to kill you. And Tamlin's like, no, the girl stays here, unharmed. End of discussion. And then Alice takes her upstairs to this like really gorgeous bedroom, and she like gives her a bath and helps her dress for dinner. She makes her look just like literally gorgy. And Feyre is sitting on her bed post-bath, just kind of thinking about whether she should put on the gown that she's been given. She's been like gifted this gown, but like she doesn't want to wear a dress because it's going to make it like really hard to run away. And that's still like her plan, is to like run back to her cottage where her family lives. And Alice is like, okay, your clothes are literally rags, but we'll find you a fresh pair of tunic and leggings. And so that's what she winds up wearing down to dinner. Tamlin and Lucien are waiting for her in the dining room. They aren't eating, but drinking out of these like gold goblets, which is like very Love is Blind of them. And Tamlin is like, hey, by the way, I told you, and I'll tell you again, the food here is totally fine. What do you want? And Lucien is like, could you be a little bit nicer? Your skill with the ladies is getting a little rusty in these recent decades. And Lucien comments on the fact that like she didn't wear the gown that was sent to her, but is instead wearing like pants. And Tamlin is like, yeah, it's because she like plans to run away, obviously. Also, it'll be easier to kill us both if she's wearing pants. Like a gown could get in the way. And Feyre gets herself a plate, even though Tamlin offers to do it for her. She's like, no, I can do it myself. And then Tamlin is like, you look better than before. Your hair is clean. And Feyre is like, okay. She's like so confused. She doesn't understand what is going on. Like, why is he poorly complimenting her? Why is she like eating dinner with these people? Like, why is he being like nice, but also like kind of not so nice? They chat. We learn that Tamlin is like high fae nobility. And he's like, hey girlie, do you have any hobbies? And Feyre is like, no. Could you let me leave? Like, my family is going to starve to death without me. They're literally like so useless. Like, I would really love it if I could leave. And Lucien is just like being cranky, and he's like mad that Feyre killed his friend. Okay, that's reasonable. And he asked for like some details about how she did it, because I don't think he totally believes her. He's like, you're tiny. How did you do that? Tricky. And Feyre's like, anyway, my family is going to die within the month. So if I could go back, that would be so great. And Tamlin is like, your family is literally fine. I made sure of it. I'm like not a monster. I wasn't going to take away their only source of like income and nourishment and not replace it. And Feyre's like, okay, well, you could have said that to me sooner. Girlie, you were asleep for the past 2 days. So like when was he going to mention it? But okay, we've like got that clarified. And again, Feyre is under the assumption at this point that Faye can't lie. So she's like, phew, don't need to worry about it. But he tells her like, as long as she stays on like this side of the wall, like her family will be cared for. But if she flees, no telling what will happen then. Feyre realizes then that she can't run, because even if she makes it back to her sisters, like where would they go? Like they're clearly too close to the wall with where they currently live, but like there's not really a lot of places they can take them. Moving is an expensive venture. And then Tamlin again is like, the food is fine. You will sit here and eat. and Lucien will stop being so hostile. And then she feels like magic kind of like holds her in her seat, and she eats a bunch of food. So blown away. The food is so delicious. It's better than anything she's ever had. She gobbles down a bunch until she's like stuffed to the brim, and then she feels like the bond loosen that was holding her to her chair, and she's excited because she's like ready to GTFO. Lucien's like, oh my gosh, do you actually want to stay and hang out with us for like a minute? We like must be better than all the human men that you've been hanging out with. Like, it'll be fun for you to hang out with us for like a little bit. And Feyre's like, I'm actually like good to go. And Lucien's like, do you have a man back home that you like pining after? And Feyre was like, well, I was close to like one man in my village. And Tim Tam is like, did you love him? Or anyone, by the way? Like, are you in a committed relationship? Should we like be worried about your husband or like your boyfriend or like your lover coming to get you? And she's like, no, it wasn't that serious. And the thing is, she like didn't love Isaac and Isaac didn't love her, but she also doesn't want to put a target on Isaac's back. She's like, my family is under enough scrutiny as it is. Like, there's no need to add more people to the list of people that the Fae are after, you know? Tamlin is like, you're going to be here for a while. Forgive us for taking some interest in our guest. Because Feyre is like a little perturbed by their questions. And Feyre's like, I like, honestly, I'm still kind of confused on what's happening here. Like, you're being very generous with me and I did murder your friend. Like, why are you making my life better than it was before? This doesn't totally add up. And Tamlin's like, well, I like kill too often as it is, so I didn't like want to kill someone else. So that's why I invited you back to my house, obviously. Feyre heads to bed. In the morning, she wakes up and she thinks about her sisters and how much she misses them because they like back home, they would all sleep in one bed. And so like they were just like always in the morning, there was like someone's arm flopped over you or like someone kicked you, and like this comfort in them being together. And like she's never been apart from her sisters like this, and she thinks about how normally they would be grumbling about her waking up so early, and she like thinks about what they might be doing. And she's just also thinking about like how weird her current situation with Tamlin is when Alice comes to the door and knocks over a bunch of things, because apparently the night before Feyre felt really uncomfortable in her room. There's like a lock on the door, but like obviously it's Tamlin's house, he probably has a key to that door. Also he's Fae, so like would that prevent much? And so she like set up like a pulley system to essentially just like let her know if someone were to come in so she could wake up and like be ready to deal with it. And Alice is like, that would have literally never stopped any of us from breaking in here and like killing you. And Feyre's like, I know that. This is just like, so I had some warning. And Alice is like, you don't need to worry about it. Like I told you, like Tamlin has warned us not to hurt you. Like he has said, like, leave her alone. And so like, we will leave her alone. And they like chat for a little bit while Feyre eats breakfast and gets ready, and Alice warns her that like all fairies will probably try to kill her outside of the estate because she's human. So like, although Tamlin has like instructed the fairies and the servants here to like not mess with Feyre, if she leaves the estate, people will not be quite as excited about her presence. And then Alice is like, maybe you should go on a walk in the gardens. That's probably like a good use for your day. She heads into the hallway. The palace is like empty, and so she like stops and is admiring a painting in the hallway. It's some of the like best work that she's ever seen, and she's like busy admiring the painting when Tamlin like sneaks up behind her and asks like what her plans are for the day, and asks if she wants a tour of the estate. And Feyre's like, no, thank you so much. No, I'm fine. Bye. And Tamlin's like, I've been inside all morning. Like I could really use some fresh air. Could give you a tour. And Feyre's like, no, I'm actually so good. And Tamlin's like, I'm not going to kill you. Like, I don't make promises. Like, you're safe with me. And Feyre's like, yeah, for sure. But, like, I am still trapped here for breaking a rule I didn't know existed. Also, like, why was your friend even in the woods that day? Like, he was on our side of the wall. Isn't it part of the treaty that Fae don't come on our side of the wall? And Tamlin says, that treaty doesn't ban us from doing anything except for enslaving you. The wall is an inconvenience. If we cared to, we could shatter it and march through and kill you all. And Feyre's like, do you want to do that? Is that something you're wanting to do? And Tamlin's like, no, I have no interest in the mortal lands, although I cannot speak for all of my kind. And Tamlin goes on to explain that there is a sickness in the land that is forcing everyone to wear these masks. That's why everyone has these masks on. It's not for fashion. It is because they have to. There was this like magical blight that surged 49 years ago, and it was during a masquerade ball, and so now everyone has masks glued to their face. And Feyre's like, that's so weird. What kind of sickness was it? And Tamlin is like, it's a magic thing. It could affect mortals eventually, but like it seems to be progressing really slowly. It seems to be like stable for now. We haven't had another big surge since that one 49 years ago. And Feyre's like, so anyway, do you guys plan on attacking the Mortal soon? Just want to know just for fun. And Tamlin kind of dodges the question and then says he will see her at dinner. Feyre takes to the gardens. She's strolling around, kind of mentally mapping the exits and like little spots to hide. She knows that the windows in her room weren't locked, so she knows she can get out that way. And she's walking around when all of a sudden she gets this like weird spooky ooky vibe. And there's like this shimmering light. And she's like, what's going on? But before she can like deal with it, before she can kind of like investigate further, Alice calls her in for lunch. That night at dinner, she steals a knife from the table, and then Lucien and Tamlin ask her if she wants to go hunting, because like that's what she did with her like free time back to the village. And she's like, no, I'm okay, I'm good. And they're like, we're really uncomfortable with the fact you don't have a hobby. Like, what are you supposed to be doing here all day if you don't have a hobby? And Feyre's like, so I would really still like to go back and like fulfill my promise to my dead mother and go back to my family. I just want to like make sure my sisters get married off and then I can have like a quiet life. Like that's really what I'm like aspiring to. And Lucien's like, okay, whatever. And then he's like, do you know anything about fairies? Didn't your mother tell you stories? And Feyre was like, well, my mother didn't have time. She died. Tamlin was like, how did she die? And Feyre says, typhus, when I was 8. Anyway, she heads to bed and stashes that knife in the dresser. In the morning, while Alice prepares Feyre's bath, she's thinking up a little plan. She wants to chat with Lucien alone. Lucien seems like the chattier of the two between Tamlin and Lucien, and according to Alice, he's on border patrol and should be in the stables. And she's like, maybe I can go on a ride with, like, get Lucien alone, and maybe he will tell me more. Because Tamlin, 1, don't love Tamlin's vibes. 2, he doesn't seem very chatty. She's rushing to the stables when Tamlin comes up behind her and is like, you didn't have any tripwires in your bedroom today, right? And Feyre was like, you said I was safe here, so I listened to you. And Tamlin's like, I'm not even busy this morning if you want to tour today. Remember that tour I offered yesterday? I could do it today, too, actually. It could be really fun. And Feyre was like, no thanks, I still don't want to tour, actually, bye. And Tamlin seems kind of annoyed at the brush off, but Feyre like does not have time for his annoyance, and she immediately heads to the stables, and Lucien greets her and is like, good morning, Feyre. What are you up to today? It's been a while since I encountered a human, let alone a fae killer. Would you indulge me in a hunt? Feyre's like, sure. She doesn't tell him that she can't hunt from horseback. Like, they were poor. They didn't have horses. She didn't have stables. Like, she always hunted on foot. Her kind of hunting was about, like, hiding, being stealthy, and then shooting something at a distance. She agrees anyway because it's a great opportunity to get him alone. And they head into the forest, and Lucien's like, you haven't even hunted anything yet. And Feyre's like, guy, it doesn't really seem like you guys need food. Like, I really kind of hunted out of necessity, so I don't know. Don't feel super compelled to kill anything. Then Feyre starts asking questions. You said you were an emissary for Tamlin. Do emissaries usually patrol the grounds? And Lucien said, well, it's Andres' shift, and someone needed to fill it because of the whole he got murdered thing. And Feyre is like, sorry about that. She does feel like really bad about murdering this like innocent fae man. He like really didn't do anything to her, and so she does feel bad that she killed him. And Lucien shrugged. Tamlin said as much, which is why, no doubt, he brought you here. Maybe because you look so pathetic in those rags, he took pity on you. And Feyre says, I wouldn't have joined you if I'd known you would use this ride as an excuse to insult me. Lucien smirked. Apologies, Feyre. So when are you going to start trying to convince me to find a way to free you from the treaty rules? What? Lucien, I'm kind of flattered that you think I have that kind of influence over Tamlin, but there really isn't a way out of this current situation. And so, yeah, really her scheme was to get Lucien alone to like ask some questions and see if there was some sort of loophole that could get her back to her family. And so with that avenue shut down, Feyre starts asking other questions. She starts asking about where the rest of Tamlin's court is. And Lucien's like, wait, how do you know about the court? And Feyre's like, well, I mean, do normal estates have emissaries and servants talk? Isn't that why you made them wear bird masks to the party? And Lucien says, everyone picked their masks to honor Tamlin's shape-shifting abilities. We all hate them and would peel them off our faces if we could. And Feyre's like, what did happen to the magic to make it act that way? And Lucien says, something was sent from the shitholes of hell. I shouldn't have said that. If word got back to her, who? And Lucien says, never mind, the less you know, the better. Tamlin might not find it troublesome to tell you about the blight, but I wouldn't put it past a human to sell the information to the highest bidder. And Feyre's like, there's some girly out there doing something. And Feyre's like, maybe she's like the high lady of one of these courts. And she's like a little bit evil. She doesn't even know if high ladies exist, but like, maybe they do. And maybe one of them is evil. And then Feyre learns that Lucien is old, but he can't shapeshift. Only Tamlin can. But Tamlin shapeshifted Andres into the wolf. And normally high fae like don't have the specific magic powers or like natural abilities unless they're connected to one of the courts. They just have like general powers, you know? And then Feyre asks about the scar over Lucien's eye, and Lucien says that he got it because he didn't keep his mouth shut when he should have, and he was punished for it. And Feyre's like, Tamlin did that to you? And Lucian's like, oh my gosh, Cauldron, and no, he would never. He actually got me this replacement eyeball. So thanks, Tam. And Feyre's like, so, are there like any types of fae that would you give you answers to questions, hypothetically, if you trapped them? And Lucian's like, yeah, the Suriel, but they're old and wicked and not worth the danger of finding them. So stop looking so intrigued, or I'll tell Tamlin to put you on house arrest. But then a spooky vibe comes over them, and Lucien says to her to like put her bow down and look straight ahead. Like, do not look around. Do not listen to the voices. Just keep staring straight ahead. And something rustles in the brush around her. And Lucien says, don't react. No matter what you feel or see, don't react. Don't look. Just stare straight ahead. Feyre feels like cold wash over her, and an ancient hollow voice says, I will grind your bones between my claws. I will drink your marrow. I will feast on your flesh. I am what you fear. I am what you dread. Look at me. Creepy. Feyre's trying to distract herself by thinking about like pleasant things and pleasant memories, but she's like terrified and cold, but she knows she can't give into the creepy voice. She has this like gut feeling that if she looks, like it's over for her. But then the thing like leaves, and Feyre is like, whew, what was that? Was that the Suriel? And Lucien is like, no, we call that the Bogge. It is a creature that shouldn't be in these lands and can't be killed. If you look at it, acknowledge it, that's when it becomes real. That's when it can kill you. And Feyre's like, ooh, creepy. And she's like, you seem like you kind of know a lot. Like, have you been to war? Like, are you a warrior? She's like, hey, were you in the war 500 years ago? And Lucian's like, no, but like, I was trained to like be a warrior. I could like fight stuff. He can handle his weapons. And Feyre is like, well, I can't really, because like hunting is definitely not like the same thing as battling. Those are like very different skill sets. That night at dinner, Lucien tells Tim Tam about the hunting expedition they took on together, and he tries to like get Feyre to talk to Tamlin. He's like, we went hunting, huh, Feyre? Tell him about it. But like Feyre doesn't like not oblige. She's like not interested in conversing with Tamlin in this way. And then Lucien says, Tam, the Bogge was in the forest today. It moved past, but it came close. It must have snuck through the border. And Tamlin's like, where? And then Tamlin immediately gets it from the table and leaves to go hunt for the Bogge. And Feyre's like, I thought you said we couldn't kill it, because Lucien had said that to her. And Lucien says, yeah, we can't, but Tamlin can. Feyre heads to bed and she watches for Tamlin out her window. Hours pass, but he still doesn't arrive. And as she's like about to go to bed, she sees this male form in the garden, and she like, it takes her a second, but she realizes very quickly it's not Tamlin. It's not any of the Fae men. It's her father. And so obviously she starts sneaking out of her room and heading out into the garden where her father is. And she like is thinking about how she wishes she would have stolen food for them from the table this morning. Like, he's probably starving. She can't believe he made it all the way here with his bad leg. And she gets in the garden. She starts following him. He's like leading her towards the gates. And then Tamlin appears like right before she reaches her dad and is like, what are you doing? And Feyre's like, my dad's actually like here to pick me up. So like, and Tamlin's like, look again. And the like image of her father like shimmers and disappears. And then it just looks like a quiver of arrows. And then it shimmers again. And it's her sisters like heaped on each other crying. And Tamlin says, I told you to keep your wits about you. Okay, I'm sorry, that's like a crazy vague warning. What was she supposed to do with that? Like, it could literally mean anything. And and then he goes on. If you're going to run away, you need to at least do it in the daytime. There are worse things than the Bogge prowling these woods at night. And Feyre says, can you blame me? My crippled father came to get me, and you think I'm not going to try to follow him? And Tamlin is like, what do you want? It is pretty nice here. Like, what can I do to convince you to stay? And Feyre's like, I want to go home. And Tamlin's like, your home is kind of gross. It's like, I saw it. It wasn't that nice. Like, why do you want to go back there? Feyre says, I made a promise to my mother that I would take care of my family. And I've spent every day trying to live up to that vow. Again, Sarah J. Maas is really putting way too much pressure on 8-year-olds. And Tamlin says to her, you're fulfilling your vows by staying here. I told you I'd take care of your dumb family. They are fed and comfortable. I literally pinky promise you. And Feyre's kind of like not sure what to do with that information, because her whole life has been spent trying to fulfill this vow to her mother. So if it's being fulfilled by the actions that Tamlin's taking, like, she doesn't really totally know what she's supposed to do with herself. But anyway, she decides now's not the time to deal with that. She has a couple more questions. She asks Tamlin about the sentries. She's like, if Lucien has to go on border patrols like once a week or whatever, and you've mentioned other sentries, like, where is everybody else? And Tamlin's like, at the border, of course. Like, we don't need sentries here at the house. So, like, we just keep them out at the border, obviously. And then Feyre and Tamlin talk about kind of his history and how when his father was alive, he served on more bands on the border. So, like, he's a trained warrior. And then Tamlin explains that, like, that was a Puca. The Puca shows up and, like, will show itself as, like, your deepest desires in an attempt to, like, lure you deeper into the forest. So, like, Feyre's deepest desire is that her father actually would care about her enough to like come for her. Ow, heartbreaking. And then Tamlin alludes to something spooky ooky happening throughout the land, making everything like too dangerous, and like talking about like the Puca being here and the Bogge and like why there was all these creepies and crawlies. The next few days consist of Feyre kind of trying to figure out what her new life is going to look like. She spends a lot of time out with Lucien on patrol, and they become kind of like friendly-ish. Tamlin has been spending a lot of time looking for the Bogge and brooding, two of his favorite hobbies, and so Feyre doesn't see a lot of him. And he seems like kind of lonely and just like grumpy. And Lucien explains like he just kind of gets into these moods sometimes. Like he's kind of a sullen man as a general rule. And then later, I think a few days later, she has a nightmare about Andres. This time, it's about her shooting the wolf. But this time, as she like dreams this, the wolf turns into Andres the moment she like shoots him. And there is like a lot of guilt. She like wakes up in a cold sweat and she decides to like take a lap around the palace. I think she does have like a ton of guilt around killing Andres, this like innocent man. And she didn't at the time. Obviously, she thought it was a wolf. And even initially when she learned it was Fae, she was like, well, the Fae are kind of evil. But as she's kind of befriended Lucien and to a lesser extent Tamlin, she does feel like a lot of guilt over ending this man's life. Because like Lucien and Tamlin are like pretty chill. She might not love him, but like she wouldn't kill him. It's not really bright enough for her to look at the art. And the voice in her head thinks about how Nesta would just like scoff at her for trying to imagine Fae art. As a Nesta apologist, this like breaks my heart. And I think it would break Nesta's heart too. I think, especially like later Nesta, not to spoil things, but Nesta does grow. Spoiler. Nesta does grow and change. It is why she gets her own book. And I think if she could look back and read this book, I think she would be like devastated. I think Nesta hurts a lot of people, and no one is probably more hurt by Nesta than Nesta. For Nesta, she mothered Feyre in like the only way she really knew how, which is this like criticism, this very rigid understanding of like what it takes to be like a successful, proper lady. And they're in a situation in which like that's not really possible for them at the moment. But like all Nesta knows how to do is what her mother did to her, which was like drill in the necessity of these like manners and these like acting really proper, even when those rules no longer apply. Their mother died when Feyre was 8. Nesta was only 11. Like she was put in this place of having to mother her sister, both of her sisters, at this like super young age. She was like just a baby herself, and I don't think she had the tools, obviously, to do this effectively. Anyway, I also think this is my time to diagnose Nesta Archeron. I talk, again, in Throne of Glass, I talked a lot about how Kale is my beloved Enneagram 6, and I believe Nesta is an Enneagram 1. Sometimes she gets typed as an Enneagram 8 because people are like, she's angry, but I think she's an Enneagram 1. We'll go more into depth about this later, but like Enneagram 1s in an unhealthy way, when they're like unhealthy Enneagram 1s, are like rigid and perfectionistic and can become like really mean and critiquing because they like have this very like rigid sense of like what the proper right thing to do is. And I really think Nesta falls into this in a way that is, you know, quite mean and sharp. Feyre's creeping around the house and she's trying to draw herself like a little map of things. But again, she can't read. She can't read or write. Again, she's an illiterate girly because her mom died when she was 8 years old, which like at 8 years old, I could read. Not to shame Feyre, but like at 8 years old, you're in like 3rd grade. I could definitely like read. I could definitely read at that point. And like we are told that like her mother didn't like prioritize her education, that like that was never something that was like top of mind. They like didn't hire a governess, and they like didn't go to the local schools because they were too proper for that. And so like she didn't really have access to that sort of education. But we know both of her sisters could read. So I'm just like a little confused on what happened with like the first 8 years of Feyre's life. I will read my notes here about how like why didn't her father step up? Her sisters get blamed for her not being able to read all the time, and like this 100% should fall on her father's. Her father like could not work a normal job. He only has his little Etsy shop, so like now he's responsible for homeschooling Feyre. Like why didn't he teach his daughter how to read? Why did he not teach his child how to read? Like, you couldn't spend 30 minutes every day teaching Feyre how to read? Like, Nesta can be blamed for a lot of things, but it's 100% Papa Archeron's fault that Feyre can't read. 100% Papa Archeron's fault, and maybe her mom's fault too, but she's dead, so unhelpful to blame her. She's working on this little map when Tamlin limps into the house, and Feyre's like, did you kill the Bogge? And Tamlin is like, yes, but like clearly he's like injured, and Feyre notes this, and then Tamlin notices her map, and she realizes that she can't write because like nothing is labeled. And he says to her, no wonder you're so adept at other things. And then Feyre asks, where can we go to clean up your hands? And Tamlin leads her to the infirmary. She cleans up his hands, and he has his, like, claws out still from beast form. But he, like, puts them away so he doesn't hurt her. And she, like, binds his hands in silence. And Tamlin says to her as, like, they're finishing up, he says, you can't write yet. You learned how to hunt, how to survive. How? And Feyre says, that's what happens when you are responsible for the lives other than your own, isn't it? You do what you have to do. And then Tamlin is like, you aren't what I expected for a human. And then he leaves. Mysterious, brooding. In the morning, she heads downstairs. All the blood has been washed away, and she eavesdrops on Tim Tam and Lucien. They're chatting in the dining room with the door open. She's in the hallway listening. Lucien says, why are you wasting your time glowering and brooding? And Tamlin says, it was a mistake from the start. I can't stomach it. Not after what my father did to their kind, to their lands. I won't follow in his footsteps. Won't be that sort of person. So back off, Lucien says. Back off? While you seal our fates and ruin everything, I stayed with you out of hope, not to watch you stumble. For someone with a heart of stone, yours is certainly soft these days. Things are getting bad here. The boys are fighting, and Feyre's just, like, listening from the hallways. She assumes they're talking about the blight, and she, like, moves a little closer, and she, like, touches the wall, and she, like, it makes a sound. And, like, normally no one would be able to hear it, but she knows the Fae have, like, extraordinary sensitive hearing. And so she's like, shoot, I'm gonna be found out. They, like, pause their conversation. And so she, like, approaches the doorway and, like, clears her throat and is like, hey, Lucien, are you going on a horseback ride today? Because I would like to come with you. And Lucien gets this cheeky little grin on his face, and he says, I am not available today, but Tamlin would love to go on a ride with you. So why don't you go with him today? And Feyre's like, okay. Actually, though, if we're, like, picking activities, I actually hate hunting. So I'd rather not do that. And Tamlin is like, okay, what do you want to do? And then next we see Tamlin and Feyre are walking through the hallways, and they're talking about how Tamlin's like, well, and, like, now makes sense why you and Lucien never catch anything if you are actually not out there hunting. And they talk about his hand and how she cleaned it up the night before. And he, like, explains that, like, the Bogge's bite has something that, like, prevents his Fae healing from working. And then he thanks her for binding up his hand. And he's like, how did you know how to do that, like, so effectively? And Feyre's like, well, I needed to bind. It's like, if I ever injured myself, I needed to be able to bind my hands enough so I could shoot an arrow again the next day. And she explains that, like, she, like, learned everything she knows about hunting and things from watching other hunters. And, like, she's never really had anyone formally teach her. She's just, like, picked up everything she's needed to know out of necessity. And then Tamlin asks, hey, like, by the way, are you planning to use that knife you stole from the table? And Feyre is surprised he noticed, but Tamlin's like, it wouldn't be enough for you to have that knife if you escaped here. Like, that would not be enough to help you survive to the wall. Feyre has a lot of questions. Feyre asks for some clarity about things that Lucien was saying to Tamlin about the monsters and the blight, and Tamlin, like, brushes it off, and he's like, you know, I'm immortal. Don't worry about me. Tamlin winds up dropping her off at the library because Feyre has decided that she needs to write a letter to her family to warn them to move further away from the wall. She's, like, experienced too many of these monsters, and she knows they're creeping through the wall into the forest, and, like, she needs to make sure her family stays safe. She doesn't want help from Tamlin, even though he offers, because she feels like it would be embarrassing. And so we, like, learn a little bit more about, like, how Feyre became an illiterate girly. We learn that her mother neglected their education, never hiring them a governess, and then her sisters thought the village school was below them. And she learned her letters and knew how to write her name, but she can't read. Another rant about Papa Archeron. It was not her sister's responsibility to teach her how to read. Where was her dad? Nesta was 11 years old, which makes Elaine 9 or 10. I'm sorry, I also didn't want to go to school when I was 11. You know what? My dad made me go to school. Why wasn't Papa Archeron like, bummer that you guys don't want to go to the village school? Go to school. I understand that his wife just died and he's, like, a little sad, but Feyre just, like, puts no blame on this man. She puts just, like, truly no blame on him. And he should have so much of the blame. Like, he really messed up. And I understand that he was in a difficult situation. I really do. But, like, he was responsible for 3 girls. And, like, he did nothing. And somehow in Feyre's, like, retelling of the story in her head, he's the victim in all of this. Anyway, Feyre, like, works on this for, like, the next couple days, taking breaks to, like, eat and sleep, but, like, really is in the study trying to teach herself how to read so she can write this letter to her family to warn them. One day she takes a break to, like, gaze at this mural in the library and is thinking about how beautiful it is. It tells the story of Prithia, and at the center is a cauldron that is spilling this, like, glowing, sparkling liquid over the map of the whole world. There are no mention of humans on the map. The next panel depicts this, like, 500-year-old battle between the humans and the Fae, and the third panel shows the division of the Feylands into the various courts. We've got, like, the season courts. So there's spring, summer, fall, and winter. And then we have the day court, the dawn court, and the night court. And then we also have this, like, mountain peak that's at the very top where the cauldron is like spilling from that seems like wholly important. It's like not labeled because clearly this is something that everyone else would like know what it was when they looked at it. She also can't read, so even if it was labeled, that would be unhelpful to her. She goes back to her table. She has like a stack of children's books that she's been looking through as she like tries to teach herself how to read. And she's like a little confused why there would be children's books here at this estate because like she hasn't seen any children. Tamlin walks in and is like, hey, I like can tell you're trying to write a letter to your family. Like you've been working on it for a couple days. I really can't help you. Write to them, like if that's what you're trying to do. And Feyre is like, help? You mean a fairy is passing up the opportunity to mock an ignorant mortal? And Tamlin is like, why should I mock you for a shortcoming that isn't your fault? Let me help you. I owe you for the hand. And Feyre's like, no thanks. And Tamlin's like, why are you letting Lucien be your friend but not me? Feyre says, Lucien doesn't pretend to be anything but what he is. I don't know you. Don't know who you are or what you really want. And Tamlin's like, so you don't trust me? And he like starts to get mad, and then Feyre like stands up and leaves. When she comes back to the study later, all of her stuff has been like moved around and looked through and rearranged. And Feyre feels like so much shame over this inability to read. And she like decides that like, okay, this is not really working. We'll come back to this if we need to. Anyway, I need like some more answers. And she wants some answers about the blight and also about all the secrets that she knows Blondie is keeping. And so she goes to find Lucien. He's in his bedroom, and she goes up to him and she says, hey, I haven't seen you around much lately. And Lucien says, I was up north dealing with some hotheads at the border. Official emissary work. It seems like you got under Tamlin's fur while I was gone, but he's headed out to the western forest to deal with the disturbance. And Feyre's like, what sort of disturbance? And Lucien's like, the usual sort, something spooky and ooky. And Feyre's like, okay, perfect. He's gone. Time for a scheme. And Feyre says, it's too bad you're not the Suriel, sprouting any information I want if I'm clever enough to snare you. And Lucien's like, I assume you aren't going to tell me what you want to know. And Feyre says, you have your secrets and I have mine. But if you were the Suriel, how would I catch you? Hypothetically, for friends. And Lucien like plays along with this like hypothetical, like if he were the Suriel situation, and tells her like where the Suriel likes to hang out and that she needs to get like a freshly butchered chicken, and then she like needs to like, if she needs to escape from the Suriel, if she crosses over running water, he won't follow her, like how the trapping should go. And then he vaguely mentions that he will be nearby if she like happens to scream. He might like happen to go investigate and help, but like one, don't get caught by Tamlin doing this, and two, if Tamlin does find you, I didn't tell you. And then Feyre says to him, it's a good thing that while you have superior hearing, I possess superior abilities to keep my mouth shut. And Lucien says, I think I'm starting to like you for a murdering human. Feyre then heads out to the birch grove with her freshly butchered chicken where Lucien told her to go. There's no one around as she like traipses through the woods, although she feels like she spots people. She like feels like she spots some girls in the river, but like out of the corner of her eye, but when she turns, it's just like a trick of the light casting off the water. Sure. Anyway, she like sets up her little trap near the stream, and then she hides and waits while eating some snacks and thinking about what seasonal court she would want to live in if she had the choice. Like spring is nice. Like back in her village, like spring would be a time where like they could find food, which great. Like winter would have been bad, but like it would get kind of boring if you lived forever to like be in the same season all the time. And so she's just like thinking about it, pondering, and she's like thinking about also who Tamlin is. She's like, I wonder who like Tamlin is in relationship to the High Lord. Forgot the name of it. High Lord of this place. Like if he's like nobility clearly, but like what's his relationship to the King of the High Lord? And then the forest goes quiet, and then she hears the whoosh of her trap, and she finds the Suriel, who's this like spooky ooky tall thin bony guy in like this tattered robe, and she's like, hey he's like hanging upside down on this trap, and she's like, hey are you the Suriel? And the Suriel goes, human. It said its voice was at once one and many, old and young, beautiful and grotesque. My bowels turned watery. Did you set this clever wicked trap for me? Anyway, we have to pause and take a moment to celebrate the first watery bowels of this book. This is one of Sarah J. Maas's favorite phrases to use. She loves to tell us when the girlies have an anxious tummy. It just makes me giggle every time. Just a little thing about Miss Sarah. Anyway, they chat about how she knew how to catch him. She pretends that she's like, actually my mom told me. And he's like, that's clearly not true. You're clearly lying. I can taste it. And then the Suriel's like, okay, ask me your question and then free me. Like, let's get this over with. And Feyre's like, is there truly no way for me to go home? And the Suriel says, not unless you seek to be killed and your family with you. You must remain here. And Feyre's like bummed out, but like doesn't really change anything. That's what she's been told. Like that's not new information to her. And then she's like, what do you know about Tamlin? And the Suriel says, I know a good many things about the High Lord of the Spring Court. And Feyre is like, Tamlin is the High Lord of the Spring Court? That is crazy. And the Suriel is like, oh my gosh, you didn't know? Yeah, he is. And then the Suriel lists off all the courts and then says, the 7 courts of Prythian, each ruled by a high lord, all of them deadly in their own way. They are not merely powerful, but they are power. And Feyre's like, oh my gosh, big deal, big business. And he explains that he's not a member of any court, and he's also older than the bones of this world. Okay, ancient mind, we love it. And then Feyre's like, okay, so what can be done about this blight that's spreading in Prythian, stealing and altering their magic? Where did it come from? And the Suriel says, stay with the High Lord, human. That's all you can do. You will be safe. Do not interfere. Do not go looking for answers after today, or you will be devoured by the shadow over Prythian. He will shield you from it, so stay close to him and all will be righted. And then Feyre asks, where did the blight come from? And the Suriel starts to explain. The High Lord does not know that you came here today, does he? He does not know that his human woman came to trap a Suriel because he cannot give her the answers she seeks. But it is not too late, human. For the High Lord, for you, perhaps for your realm as well. Across the violent western sea, there is another fairy kingdom called Hybern, ruled by a wicked, powerful king. Yes, a king, he said when I raised a brow, not a high lord. There, his territory is not divided into courts. There, he is law unto himself. Humans no longer exist in that realm, though his throne is made of their bones. For some time now, the king of Hybern has found himself unhappy with the treaty, the other ruling high fae of the world, made with you humans long ago. He resents that he was forced to sign it, to let his mortal slaves go and remain confined to his damp green isle at the edge of the world. And so, 100 years ago, he dispatched his most trusted and loyal commanders, his deadliest warriors, remnants of the ancient armies he once sailed to the continent to wage such a brutal war against you humans, all of them as hungry and vile as he is. And as spies and courtiers and lovers, they infiltrated the various high fae courts and kingdoms and empires around the world for 50 years, and when they had gathered enough information, he made his plan. But nearly 5 decades ago, one of his commanders disobeyed him, the deceiver, and then the Suriel straightens and he goes, we are not alone. So we were about to get the tea on what happened with the blight, and unfortunately, they got interrupted. The Suriel is like, hey, girlie, you need to run back to the manor ASAP, and don't forget what I told you. Stay with the High Lord. The Naga are coming, and the Suriel is like, you need to let me free because they will cage me if they find me, and then they're going to eat you if they find you. So, like, you need to free me, and then we need to get out of here. And then the Naga walk into the clearing. There are 4 of them, and they look like these, like, snake people, but they all have, like, big, long talons, and they're, like, scaly and black and spooky ooky. And they're talking about how they're gonna eat her. And Feyre knows she needs to scream to bring Lucien, but she, like, can't find the breath, and she's also not sure that he's gonna come. Like, Lucien still doesn't love Feyre, even though they've become, like, kind of friends. She still did murder his bestie, Andres. And so she shoots down the snare, and then she's able to shoot the first Naga, who's lunging for the Suriel. And Feyre takes off running. She knows she needs to get to Lucien. It's her only chance of surviving this because they're, like, quickly running behind her. She punches one in the face as it gets close to her with her, like, arm, but then she is, like, surrounded. And they're, like, in a bad mood now because they didn't get the Suriel. They snap her bow, and they're like, we're gonna eat you up. She takes the knife that she had, like, tucked into her boots that she stole from dinner. She stabs one in the neck. She gets blood all over her. But, like, you know. But then the other 2, like, jump on her and they, like, tackle her to the ground. She's like, phew, and then they whisper in her ear, we'll bleed you nice and slow. But then a roar echoes through the clearing. It's Tamlin. He rips up the Naga with his claws, like, pretty quickly. And saves the day. Yay, thanks, Tamlin. And Feyre immediately is like, oh my gosh, how did you find me? And Tamlin is like, I was tracking a pack of them through the woods. These 4 escaped and must have followed your scent through the woods. I heard you scream. And he uses his magic to help heal her face where she, like, got slammed into the ground. And he explains how he tracked them, finding one of her arrows in one of their body. Like, he found the body of one of them, and he found one of her arrows in their throat. Feyre's, like, trying to understand this, but also trying to grapple with the fact that she's just learned that Tamlin is the High Lord. And then they're, like, walking back to the house, and Tamlin's like, hey, maybe in the future, on days when I'm not around, you could stick a little closer to the house for safety reasons. And Feyre's like, yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for saving my life. And Tamlin's like, it's pretty much my job. They shouldn't have gotten this far into the spring court. Let's go home. And Feyre doesn't correct him that manor is not her home. Feyre comes back. She takes a bath. Alex, like, gets her ready. She's looking cute again. Gives her a hot chocolate. Is just, like, a life of luxury. Like, truly, that's the dream, isn't it? To, like, have someone, like, braid your hair at night before dinner, before you go look cute for dinner. That would be my dream. Feyre asks Alice, if more fairies keep crossing the borders and attacking, is there going to be a war? And Alice is like, don't ask such questions. You'll call down bad luck. It's none of your concern. And Feyre is like, it's sort of part of my concern, like, because if it makes it to the human world, it could affect my family. And Alice is like, let Lord Tamlin deal with it. And then Alex goes on to say, you think no one would tell me what you asked the kitchen to give you today or realize what you wanted to trap? Foolish, stupid girl. Had the Suriel not been in a benevolent mood, you would have deserved the death it gave you. I don't know what's worse, this or your idiocy with a Puca. And Feyre's like, would you have done anything else if you had a family at stake? And Alice is like, I do have a family. And Feyre looks down and is like, you don't have a wedding ring. Okay, Feyre, very small-minded. You can have a family without being married. And Alice goes on to explain, my sister and her mate were murdered almost 50 years ago, leaving 2 younglings behind. Everything I do, everything I work for is for these boys. So you don't have the right to give me that look and ask me if I would do different, girl. And Feyre's like, boys, like, do they live here? And Alice is like, no, they don't live here. They live somewhere else, far away. And Alex explains that, like, Fae age, like, much slower than humans. And they also have a much more difficult time conceiving children. And so children are, like, really prized as this, like, really special, incredible thing that they're, like, even more highly valued than human children. And these boys in particular are just, like, so important to her. They, like, truly are her family, all the family she has left. And then Alice says, the next time that fool Lucien gives you advice on how to trap the Suriel, you come to me. Dead chickens, my sagging ass. All you needed to do was offer him a new robe and it would have groveled at your feet. Then it's dinner time. She heads downstairs to dinner with Lucien and Tamlin. And Lucien is like, oh my gosh, I heard you had an exciting afternoon. Wish I could have been there to help, but you look lovely. And Feyre's like, thought you couldn't lie. I look lovely. And Tamlin was like, who told you that? And then Lucien says, we can lie. We're actually, like, so good at lying. And Feyre internally starts to, like, panic because, like, she assumed that they've been telling her the truth this whole time. But if they can lie, like, oh no, what does she believe that has been false? Like, even the stuff the Suriel told her could have been fake. And Tamlin says, we've never willingly lied to you. Are you feeling better now? And Feyre's like, well, I mean, I'm not looking for a repeat of the afternoon. Like, I'd be happy to never see a Naga again, but, like, yes. And Tamlin is like, what were you doing out in those woods anyway? And Feyre's like, well, I caught the Suriel. And Tamlin is like, okay, did it tell you what you wanted to know? He's, like, feeling a little anxious. She's gathering some anxiety from that side of the table. And Feyre says, the Naga came along before it could. And Tamlin says, I'd start shouting, but I think today was punishment enough. You actually snared the Suriel, a human girl. And then Feyre goes, is it supposed to be hard? Tamlin's laughing. And then he pulls the list from the library where Feyre had been writing down all the words she didn't know on a piece of paper. And he pulls it out of his pocket and he reads it aloud. Well, if I'm lucky, I won't have to trap the Suriel to learn what this is about. He lifted up my crumpled list of words. My heart dropped to my stomach. I couldn't think of a suitable lie. Everything was absurd. Unusual, Q, slaying, conflagration. He read the list. I wanted to curl up and die. Words I couldn't recognize from the books. Words that now seemed so simple, so absurdly easy as he was saying them aloud. Is this a poem about murdering me and then burning my body? My throat closed up. I had to clench my hands into fists to keep from hiding my face behind them. Good night, I said, barely more than a whisper, and stood on my shaking knees. I was nearly to the door when he spoke again. You love them very much, don't you? I wonder if your family realizes it, he murmured, that everything you've done wasn't about that promise to your mother, or for your sake, but for theirs. I said nothing, not trusting my voice to keep my shame hidden. I know that when I said it earlier, it didn't come out well, but I could help you right. And Feyre's like, leave me alone. I do not need your help. And Tamlin says, clearly not. You've proven how much you can take care of yourself. They're fools for not seeing it. You gave up so much for them. Do you even know how to laugh? This comment is so absurd to me. Like, what do you mean? Do you even know how to laugh, Feyre? This is, like, such a man comment. Like, I feel like this is like a man in a movie comment. Do you even know how to smile anymore? I, like, really hate it. And I want Feyre to be like, yeah. I'm sorry, Nesta's hilarious. I'm sure when she's not being mean, she says some funny jokes. I'm sure Feyre has had a giggle. And Feyre's like, I don't want your pity. And Tamlin says, what about a friend? Feyre, can fairies be friends with mortals? Tamlin, 500 years ago, fairies were friends enough with mortals to go to war on their behalf. Feyre's like, what? He's like, how do you think human armies survived as long as they did, and did such damage that my kind even came to agree to a treaty? With ash weapons alone? There were fairies who fought and died at the human side for their freedom, who mourned when the only solution was to separate our peoples. Tamlin explains, he goes on to explain that he was only a child at the time, so he didn't go to battle, but he would have, because he's a really good guy. Then Tamlin goes on to say, your family knows you're safe. They have no memory of a beast busting into their cottage and think a long-lost, very wealthy aunt called you away to aid her on her deathbed. They know you're alive, fed, and cared for, but they also know that there have been rumors, a threat, in Prithian and are prepared to run should any of the warning signs about the wall faltering occur. Feyre, is for a second a little upset about their altering their memory, but Tamlin goes on to explain that he did it because he worried that they would come for her, and, that's not safe for them. They can't try to come rescue her. And Feyre's like, don't even worry about it. My dad literally would have never come. My dad would never come for me. Feyre relaxes a little bit because she's realized, her family is safe. And that for the first time in years, she's not, beholden and responsible for their survival. They are taken care of, and she, gets to take care of herself. And the first thing she does is ask for paint supplies. And Tamlin's like, you like to paint? She's like, thank God, we've been asking if you have a hobby for ages. We're so glad you found one. And Feyre says, yes, I'm not very good, but if it's not too much trouble, I can even paint outside, so it's if I don't make a mess. And Tamlin is like, you can paint literally wherever you want. I will get you supplies. And Feyre's like, I can pay for them. I can work in the kitchens or in the gardens to cover costs. And Tamlin is like, don't even worry about it. I will cover the costs. What are taxes for? But to cover the costs of my human girlfriend's painting supplies. And then Tamlin goes on to say, have you seen the gallery? I had it closed off when I inherited the house because it seems silly to have the servants clean it. But I'll have the servants opening it up and get it ready tomorrow while I'm gone, and then I'll show you the next day. And Feyre is like, oh my gosh, I would love that. He smiled at me broadly and without restraint or hesitation. Isaac had never smiled at me like that. Isaac had never made my breath catch, just a little bit. The feeling was startling enough that when I walked out, grasping the crumpled paper in my pocket, as if doing so could somehow keep that answering smile from tugging on my lips. Feyre has a little crush on Blondie Boy. Oh my gosh, that's so fun. Okay, that's where we're going to leave ACOTAR for today. Our next one, we get to meet a new friend. Everyone's favorite friend comes in the next section, and I'm excited about it. I hope you are too. Current plan is to have one of these come out every Friday, Saturday for the next few weeks. Finish this book. We'll probably take a little break after this book before we jump into Mist and Fury. I would love to see you in the next one. Subscribe if you aren't already so you know when that video comes out, and I will see you then. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.